How pattern recognition became your greatest enemy. Your mind is a pattern-detecting machine. That's literally what kept your ancestors alive. Spot the predator in the bushes, recognize the poisonous plant, predict the storm. But here's the twisted part. That same mechanism that once saved your life is now sabotaging your evolution. Because in a world where physical survival is mostly handled, your brain redirected all that pattern recognition power toward one thing: maintaining your comfort zone. Think about it. Every time something unusual happens, every time reality glitches in a way that doesn't fit your existing worldview, your brain immediately goes into damage control mode. It rationalizes, dismisses, files it under weird but irrelevant. You see repeating numbers? Just coincidence. You think of someone and they call? Probability. You get a gut feeling about a decision? Just anxiety. Your mind has become a professional debunker of anything that threatens the story you've been telling yourself about how life works. But what if that story is a prison? Research from Princeton University showed that our brains actively suppress information that contradicts our established beliefs, literally filtering reality to match our expectations. You're not experiencing reality. You're experiencing your brain's edited version of reality, carefully curated to keep you feeling safe and in control. Here's where it gets interesting. The universe doesn't care about your comfort zone. It's not trying to make you feel safe. It's trying to wake you up. And it's been sending you messages your entire life through what most people lazily call coincidences. That job opportunity that appeared right when you were thinking about change. That stranger who said exactly what you needed to hear. That book that fell off the shelf. None of it random. All of it communication. But you've been trained to ignore it. Your education system taught you that only measurable, repeatable, logical things are real. Your culture taught you that intuition is unreliable and feelings are irrational. Your social conditioning taught you that successful people make calculated decisions, not ones based on signs from the universe. So you learned to distrust the very mechanism that could actually guide you toward alignment. The tragic irony is that you're walking around with a sophisticated internal GPS system, but you've been taught to ignore it and rely only on outdated paper maps. You have access to quantum-level information processing through your subconscious, but you've been convinced that only your slow, linear, conscious mind is trustworthy. And here's the brutal truth. Every time you ignore your intuition, and it turns out to be right, you're not just missing an opportunity. You're reinforcing the neural pathways that keep you disconnected. You're teaching yourself not to trust yourself. You're becoming more deaf to the signals with each dismissal. Stop. When was the last time you felt something was off and ignored it? Anyway, drop it in the comments. If this is hitting different, smash that like and subscribe. Why? Everything you call random is actually a response. Let's talk about what you've been calling chaos. Every breakdown, every unexpected turn, every moment where life seemed to derail your plans. You've been treating these as interruptions, as obstacles, as bad luck. But what if they're not interruptions at all? What if they're course corrections from a system that sees further ahead than you do? Here's the framework you're missing. The universe operates on feedback loops, not linear progression. You set an intention, conscious or unconscious, and reality responds. Not immediate, not obviously, but it responds. The problem is you're looking for cause and effect in a three-dimensional timeline when the actual mechanism operates outside of linear time. You're trying to read sheet music when the universe is playing jazz. A study from Stanford's psychology department found that people who experienced major life disruptions showed significantly higher rates of career fulfillment 5 years later, but only if they interpreted the disruption as redirection rather than failure. Same events, completely different outcomes based solely on interpretation. The disruption wasn't the problem. The resistance to the message was. Think about your own life trajectory. That relationship that imploded right before you would have made a huge mistake. That opportunity that vanished because something better was coming. That health scare that forced you to completely restructure your priorities. At the time, you probably called it bad luck. Looking back, can you see the pattern? Can you see how you were being moved, sometimes gently, sometimes forcefully, toward a version of yourself you hadn't yet imagined? The universe doesn't speak English. It speaks in synchronicities, in recurring themes, in opportunities that appear with suspicious timing, in obstacles that force you to pivot. And the more you resist, the louder it gets. Because you're not separate from the system. You're part of it. Your desires, your growth, your evolution are literally encoded into the fabric of your reality. But you've been taught to see yourself as a separate entity fighting against a hostile or indifferent universe. That's the lie that keeps you stuck. You're not fighting against anything. You're dancing with something. And the moment you stop leading and start following, everything flows differently. Not easier necessarily, but more aligned. Less friction, more momentum. Less exhaustion, more synchronicity. But this requires you to let go of the illusion of control. To stop trying to force outcomes and start noticing patterns. To trade your rigid plans for flexible responsiveness. And for most people, that's terrifying. Because if you're not in control, if you're not the one making everything happen through sheer force of will, then who are you? Think. What's one thing that fell apart that now makes perfect sense? Comment below. If you're starting to see it, hit that like and subscribe. How consciousness hacked reality before you knew it was possible. Now, we're going deeper. Everything I've told you so far assumes you're a passive receiver of universal messages, but that's only half the equation. Because here's what they don't tell you in self-help books and manifestation workshops. You're not just reading the code, you're writing it. Every thought, every emotion, every intention you hold is literally programming your reality. Not metaphorically, literally. Quantum physics already proved this at the smallest scales. The observer effect demonstrates that the act of observation changes what's being observed. Your consciousness isn't separate from reality. It's participating in reality's construction at every moment. But you've been doing it unconsciously, randomly, contradictorily. You're running buggy code and then wondering why your life keeps glitching. Research from the Institute of Heart Math showed that human heart rhythms can affect random number generators up to several feet away, suggesting that our coherent emotional states can influence physical systems. This isn't mysticism. This is measurable, repeatable science, pointing to something our ancestors knew instinctively. Your internal state shapes your external reality. So when you experience synchronicity, when you notice patterns, when reality seems to respond to your thoughts, you're not imagining it. You're noticing the feedback loop. You're catching a glimpse of how the system actually works. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The question becomes, what are you going to do with that knowledge? Most people, even when they start to see the patterns, immediately try to weaponize them. They want to manifest money, relationships, success. They turn synchronicity into a cosmic vending machine. And that's when everything stops working. Because the system doesn't respond to greed or desperation. It responds to alignment, to coherence, to genuine resonance with who you actually are. Beneath all the conditioning, here's the paradox. The more you try to force specific outcomes, the more you block the flow. The more you surrender to what wants to emerge through you, the more synchronicities appear. It's not about controlling reality. It's about becoming so clear, so aligned, so authentic that reality naturally organizes around your true frequency. And that requires brutal honesty. You have to stop lying to yourself about what you actually want versus what you think you should want. You have to stop chasing goals that belong to someone else's version of success. You have to get quiet enough to hear what your actual signal is, beneath all the noise you've been trained to broadcast. Real talk. What are you chasing that isn't actually yours? Drop it below. If this is rewiring something, like and subscribe. What happens when you finally stop pretending you don't know? Here's the final piece. You already know all of this. Not intellectually. Deeper than that. There's a part of you that's been screaming these truths your entire life, and you've been systematically drowning it out with logic, distraction, and socially acceptable self-deception. You know when something's right. You know when it's wrong. You know when you're on path, and when you've veered off. You've always known. The question isn't whether the code exists or whether you can read it. The question is, when are you going to stop pretending you can't? Because that pretense has been costing you everything. Every ignored intuition, every rationalized away synchronicity, every gut feeling you dismissed in favor of what made sense. All of it was you choosing the safety of ignorance over the responsibility of knowing. A meta-analysis published in Psychological Science found that intuitive decisions in complex scenarios often outperform analytical ones, particularly in domains where the decision maker has experience. Your gut isn't guessing. It's processing millions of data points your conscious mind can't access. But you've been trained to distrust it, to wait for logical justification that often arrives too late. So what changes when you stop pretending? Everything and nothing. The external circumstances of your life might not immediately shift, but your relationship to those circumstances transforms completely. You stop feeling like a victim of randomness and start experiencing yourself as a participant in an intelligent system. Obstacles become information. Setbacks become recalibrations. Challenges become invitations to evolve. You start noticing that the right people appear at the right time, that doors close right before better ones open, that your so-called mistakes position you perfectly for unexpected opportunities. Not because you suddenly got lucky, but because you finally started paying attention to how it's always worked. And here's what nobody tells you. Once you start living this way, you can't go back. You can't unsee the patterns. You can't unhear the messages. You can't return to the comfortable fiction that life is random, and you're powerless. You become responsible for your alignment, for your choices, for how you respond to what the universe is clearly communicating. That responsibility is freedom, terrifying freedom. The freedom to stop waiting for permission, for perfect conditions, for external validation. The freedom to trust yourself, to follow your knowing, to make moves that don't make sense to anyone else, but feel undeniably right to you. The code was never hidden. You were just taught not to look. Wake up. What's the most obvious message you've been ignoring? Tell me in the comments. If this changed something, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this.